while maybe a couple of more people join, I'm just going to do a little bit of an intro, more about what these sessions are about, and then hey Hannah, and then Katie, I'll ask you to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what you do, and then we'll go a bit more into your story. Hey Hannah. So these sessions, I've been running them every week, every Friday evening for us in the UK, and I know that everyone's not in the UK, so whatever time it is for you, but 7 p.m. GMT. And it's really an opportunity to create a space for the LGBTQ plus community and bring our attention and bring our awareness to well-being and wellness and how important it is for all of us, especially maybe us in the LGBTQ plus community, where things like our mental health struggles, it's widely known that is something that is a lot higher for us in the LGBTQ plus community, in terms of the challenges and the struggles around mental health particularly. So it just felt important for me to raise awareness around that, but also to invite in amazing wellness practitioners and coaches and people that are here to help and support you if you're in the queer community, and our wonderful allies. These sessions are absolutely here for you too, and just to create that space and that community and that connection. That was my intention. And so here we are tonight. Hi Nicola, and I am joined by the wonderful Katie, and I'm going to start with hi Kirsty, my pronouns and how I identify. So my pronouns are she and her, and I identify as a gay woman. So Katie, if you'd like to introduce yourself and tell us what your pronouns are and how you identify as well, that would be wonderful.
Okay, well, I'm Katie Neeves, and my pronouns are she and her, and I'm a lesbian, and I'm also trans.
Wonderful, thank you. So the way we're going to kind of have this conversation tonight is, Katie, I'd love it if you could tell us about what you do, the work you do, and how you got into it and what you love about it. Just to give people a flavour of the work you do, the amazing work that you do, and then it is, and then we're going to talk a bit about your sort of spiritual journey, spiritual awakening, however you want to describe it. I think it's such a brilliant story, and so many lessons in there, and I think people will really get a lot out of hearing about it and how it's helped you. So be a bit first about you and what you do and what you love about it.
Well, I've been a professional photographer and filmmaker for the last 33 years, but 2.5 years ago I came out very openly and very publicly as being a transgender woman after living for 48 years as a man. And so I now have a new business, so as a trans ambassador, called Cool to be Trans, where I help companies with their diversity and inclusion by doing trans awareness training, public speaking and media appearances. And I also seem to be doing a lot of campaigning these days as well. I've become a bit of an activist, and somehow I don't like that word activist, but I am very active, aren't I? So I suppose I am an activist. I like stirring things up a bit. I think that's the problem.
I'm beginning to get that feeling myself as well, actually.
I just don't like injustice, and it's just like all these, all the constant stream of transphobia that's been coming out of people like J.K. Rowling, and I just felt I had to stand up to her because a lot of people sort of, felt that they couldn't, because that if you're going to stand up to someone who's like Queen Turf, the sort of trans exclusionary radical feminist, someone who's so anti-trans, and so famous,
Mm.
you're going to get a lot of hate back. And then I did. I had over 1,000 messages of hate from that. But I just felt that I had to stand up to it because I felt able to do that, and a lot of people didn't. And even though I got all those thousands of messages of hate, I also got lots of lovely messages from particularly parents of trans children. And I had some lovely messages from those saying that they really thanked me for what I'd said, because they wanted to say it, but they felt unable to say it because they they didn't want to out their children. And so and also they were worried about all the hate and everything. So
You wrote an open letter, is that right?
I did. I wrote an open letter, yeah, and it really
Mm.
stirred things on. And it went massive. It went global. I mean, it went. It's on my Call to Be Trans Facebook page, among other places. But that's where most of the action happened. And on there, it's had I think so far about 50,000 views, and it's had about 23,000 interactions. And then it was picked up and run by Upworthy, and it trended on their site for 5 days on their top 3 stories, and they've got 11.5 million followers on their Facebook page alone, without all the other stuff that they do. So it really did go big. But I just felt it needed saying, and so I've sort of become a bit of an activist really. But I don't like injustice, and I don't like it when people are saying incorrect things and ill-informed things, and there's a lot of misinformation about trans people. And my whole aim is just to show that trans people are just ordinary people who want to be safe, loved and happy just like everyone else. That's it. We're just ordinary people.
And that's at the heart of all of your work that you do, isn't it?
It is.
So you're a trans ambassador, trainer, educator.
General dog spotting.
So what sort of work do you do with like organisations and stuff like that? You go into organisations, don't you? And
go in and help. Well, at the moment, not so much going in, because obviously we're all sort of kept at arm's length at the moment. So it's all done remotely at the moment.
World.
It's all Zooming at the moment, but no, but it's all going and do trans awareness training, and I do things like it often starts off with doing like a 1-hour lunch and learn session, and in which I can go in and tell my story, and then I give some top tips for being a trans ally, and do a Q&A where I will answer anything. I create a safe space where people can actually ask me anything, and I won't be offended by what they ask me. It's their safe space, and then that often then escalates to then they'll often then book me to do 3-hour trans awareness training sessions where I can go into in much more depth. But the 1-hour sessions are very popular, to be honest. Often they like to get people in their lunchtime, and and I can do quite a lot of educating just through telling my story. Actually educates a lot actually, and it brings people along on the journey with me, and they sort of put themselves in my shoes and think, oh blimey, what would I do if if that happened to me?
And before we sort of dive into your story a bit more, I wonder if it's worth just highlighting maybe the sort of some of the current. It's not been a great week for the trans community, has it?
It's been a very difficult week. There was a court case. There was a court case on Tuesday. Basically, there's a service called GIDS, which is the Gender Identity Service, which is based. It's based in London at the Tavistock clinic, which basically it's a gendered clinic for children. It's the only one in the country. Well, they've got 2 sites, but it's run by the same clinics. It's the only one in the country. But they were taken to court by a woman who had previously identified as trans and then changed her mind, and she'd been treated by them, and she was taken to the court along with another woman called Mrs. A, or so we're calling her in court, who was her child wanted treatment, and they wanted puberty blockers, basically to delay their puberty, just to buy them some more thinking time. But her, her mum, their mum, didn't want that to happen. She was basically an unsupportive mum, and so the two of them were taken to court, backed by an anti-trans campaign group called Transgender Trend, and basically they won the case. But the only reason that they won the case is because the Tavistock Clinic, who just didn't take their defence seriously at all. It's inexcusable, frankly, what they did. They had the opportunity to bring in experts such as Mermaid Charity, who support trans children and their families, and also people like Gender GP, which is a private gender clinic, and they've got a lot of experience of dealing with children, and they've got a lot of data as well, and so they could have provided a lot of evidence, and both organisations asked if they could give evidence, and they weren't allowed to. They refused. However, Transgender Trend, this anti-trans campaign group, they were allowed to give it evidence, and so they gave it evidence, and the judge basically had to judge the evidence on the case on the evidence placed before them on the day. And so with the evidence they had, and the fact that the Tavistock Clinic, when asked, didn't produce or couldn't produce any data, they were just so weak in their defence. And so in the end, the judge then decided that children under the age of 16 are too immature to decide for themselves about whether they should have blockers or not. And what blockers are? They're hormone blockers that actually delay their puberty. They don't start transition at all. They are fully reversible. So that it's not cross-sex hormones. That's the sort of a next stage on. It is purely to delay the onset of puberty, to buy them some more time, because it's awful. You imagine as a trans child approaching puberty. I mean, puberty is a difficult enough time for children anyway, but as a trans child, it's like a car crash coming towards you, and you could see it because it's you're seeing all your peers, and they're all changing. They're developing in a way that they want to, because they identify with the way that their bodies are developing. But for trans children, that's not the case. It's going in the opposite direction. So if you, for instance, if you were born with male genitalia, you were assigned male at birth, but you identify as female, but then that you've got this puberty rapidly approaching, that there's going to be irreversible damage done to your body by puberty, by the testosterone. Your voice is going to break, so you're going to have a deep voice. You're going to develop the Adam's apple. You'll probably have more masculine facial features, and the typical square jaw and all the stuff. You probably grow bigger and taller and broader. All these things that it does that, but with the blockers, they actually just provide just a little bit of breathing space and a little bit of thinking time just for them, and then they have an awful lot of counselling. Cross-sex hormones are not given just like that. They have to go through an awful, and they've got an awful lot of a long waiting time before they actually get to that point anyway. I mean, trans kids go through absolute hell, they really do. And what's happened as a result of this court case is, because the judge has said that the children under the age of 16 can't decide that for themselves, they're saying now that the clinics can't give it without a court order. And so now, straight away, the Tavistock Clinic just said, right, that's it, we're stopping all treatment.
Well, even the ones that are already on the treatment.
Even the ones that are already on there, saying they can't have it without a court order. But they needn't have taken that stand, because the only private clinic, gender clinic, that will treat children in this country is one called Gender GP. They still are doing it, and they are confident that their prescriptions and everything and diagnosis is robust, and they are standing up for trans children. So the only option at the moment is if the parents can afford to pay to go privately, which shouldn't be down to that at all. But that's the only hope at the moment. I mean, it is horrendous. I mean, Tavistock are appealing, right, and I really hope that they win their appeal. And I hope that they bring on board experts from mermaids and from
Yeah.
genders GP, because
Yeah.
they have got solid evidence that
Yeah.
but it's inexcusable that Tavistock have let the children down. And I've had parents of trans kids that I've been helping, and they've been on to me, and they've been absolutely distraught. And they said they don't want to tell their children what's happened. They don't want to break their hearts. It's just awful. It's awful. There's so much distress going on, and it's all brought about by this this basically anti-trans group, campaign group that have been financing all this. It's awful. So it's been a really tough week for
Yeah.
trans children and their families this week.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, my heart goes out to everybody, and I'm sure that you'll be close to the forefront of any sort of action that anyone can take to support.
I'll do what I can, and certainly publicise it as much as I can, and fight the corner, and just be there for them. Do whatever I can do, but I do feel a bit helpless at the moment with it.
Devastating. I've seen a few things about it, and sort of, okay, well, thank you for sharing that, and thank you for hopefully helping anyone that wasn't aware or had just heard a little bit about it to sort of understand the fuller picture about what's going on there. And I think it's something that is always sort of not really in the back of my mind, almost in the forefront of my mind, around our rights generally, and how at risk they can be, for all of us. So
well, we had a massive battle, in this last year, with trans rights, and with all the campaigns that have been going on, because we could have so easily have had our rights taken away, and it was a very, very real threat. And we, this was with the review of the reform of the Gender Recognition Act 2004, and we could have very easily have seen a rollback of our rights, and it felt like a bit of a hollow victory, but it was a victory in the fact that we actually defended our rights, so we didn't lose any rights. However, there was a golden opportunity by the government that was completely missed, because we're no further forward. It's pathetic what they've done, really, but at least we haven't lost any rights, but we're way behind many other countries now. We really are in this country. I'm getting all political, aren't I?
Well, I was passionate about it. It affects you, it affects all of the people that you care about deeply, and that we all care about, and sort of equality and treating people fairly. And
the thing is that I hear so much misinformation. And I hear so much misinformation that's been put out by the anti-trans campaigners, and it's just so wrong. The stuff they're saying is just incorrect. It's incorrect that they're saying these things. It's just and it's just not. It's not fair. They shouldn't be doing it. But and I hear it, and I have I have people, I end up having to defend my own gender, and on social media, and I'm sure you've seen them. I even had a battle on LinkedIn the other day with it, which normally people on LinkedIn tend to behave themselves. It's normally Facebook or Twitter is the worst one, but quite often Facebook. Very often Facebook. But LinkedIn is usually all right, but someone's having a right go, and the stuff they were saying was just so wrong, and they were quoting supposed facts that were completely incorrect. They weren't naming the sources at all, but they were just making it up as they went along. And the trouble is that often people see that and they believe it, and so that's why I felt I had to defend it, and with facts and sources.
Well, good. Thank you for all you do. So it's really important. It is difficult, it's hard, it feels heavy, and upsetting, but thank you for talking about it. It needs to be spoken about. People need to be aware of what's going on too, so thank you, Katie.
No, you're welcome.
So from that, we're gonna completely kind of shift gear a bit, and Yeah, I'd love it if you could tell us about sort of how your journey was influenced by, you know, spirituality and kind of where it started. And you can start wherever
Okay.
you like, because I've heard your
Yeah.
stories. So
You've heard the story probably many times. Do
yeah,
you want me to?
I
Do you want
never
me to? Do you
tire
want
of
me to tell
hearing
that? Do you want me to tell? Do you want me to tell the whole story, or do you want me to sort of skip it? So
it.
it's up to you.
Well, you could do an abridged bit until is
Okay.
it the networking event when
Okay. Yeah.
you
Yeah. Okay.
meet the woman?
All right. Okay. I'll do an abridged version to there. Yeah. I thought you probably would because I was going to say, how long you got?
Exactly,
You know how
yeah.
much I talk,
An
Sarah.
abridged version, yeah. Like,
How long was the podcast I did? Was it an hour and a half or something?
yeah, we had you've had the
I
record
did too.
podcast interview.
I
I
do have a
split it in
reputation.
half. It was all good though. I couldn't like, you know, I couldn't edit it. I had to keep it all.
Yeah. I know I had 2 episodes to myself, didn't I? Very greedy. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll do an abridged version until I'll try anyway.
Go for it.
Okay. So I was born 51 years ago, and as still as the established norm, I was assigned a sex based purely on my physical sex characteristics, i.e., what was between my legs. I was assigned male at birth, and I was given the name Martin Albert Neeves. Don't look like a Martin, do I? Or an Albert. The correct answer is no there, Sarah. Okay. No, thank you.
Sorry, I'm just letting you speak. I'm just letting you
Oh,
speak.
okay. All right, fair enough. However, at the age of around 3 or 4, my head and my heart were telling me something very different to the label that I'd been given at birth. Because one of my earliest memories was of my mum catching me trying on a pair of my sister's knickers. And I remember when she did it, when I tried them on, it felt so right. I felt right. But then my mum caught me and she told me to take them off. And then for every day the following week, she would pull my shorts down and she would check to make sure I was wearing my own pants. And it was humiliating. But it sowed the seeds for a very long time that what I did was wrong, it was naughty, it was dirty, it was not what respectable people did. The thing is that the need to dress was still there. So throughout my childhood, I would secretly dress in my sister's clothes whenever I had the opportunity. And whenever I did it, it felt so right. But then those feelings of feeling right were very quickly superseded by feelings of guilt and shame and self-loathing. And it was many years before I would admit to myself that I was then a cross-dresser. And I'll abridge the next bit. But basically, a vicious cycle then started up for many years, where I would cross-dress in secret. I would then hate myself for doing it, and then I promised myself that I'd never do it again, and I'd really try really hard. But however how hard I tried, the urge to dress would always come back, and usually with a vengeance. And this vicious cycle went right on until my mid-20s. Tried to become a press photographer, worked on newspapers in Kent, got married for the first time. I then moved up to the Midlands, got a job as a senior staff photographer at the Coventry Evening Telegraph, stayed there for 5 years, left, and then started up my own freelance photography and video business, which is called Martin Neeves Photography and Film. And it was only in my mid-20s that I finally admitted to myself and embraced the fact that I was then a cross-dresser. And as soon as I did that, it was like a whole weight lifting off my shoulders, because I no longer felt guilty about it. And I realised I had a condition called gender dysphoria, which is a great feeling of unease and distress caused by a mismatch between how I felt in my head and my heart, i.e. my gender identity, as opposed to my sex characteristics and the label that I'm given at birth. And the thing with gender dysphoria is that it can vary in intensity, and it very often increases over time. And that's what happened with me, and I was completely unprepared for that. But anyway, at the time, the level of gender dysphoria that I had was low enough that by cross-dressing was enough to satisfy it.
Yeah.
But anyway, my first marriage failed because my first wife didn't, never accepted my cross-dressing, and then I got married again eventually. But I did. Well, I met another woman. We had a child, and then we didn't actually get married until August 2017. However, you can tell this is an abridged version, can't you? I'm just yeah. However, a few months before we got married, I just happened to meet a clairvoyant and a spiritual guide.
And how were you feeling? Like, how were you feeling at that time? So it sounds like you felt quite relieved, and you could sort of accept that you were cross-dressing, and that kind of gave you a like, phew, this is me.
At the time, I was happy as a man who needed to cross-dress. That was how it was. My life was happy. I was perfectly fine. I viewed it as a hobby that I would always need to do. That it would always be part of me. But I would always need to do, and that's just how I viewed it, and that was fine.
Yeah.
So that was I was content.
Still,
Absolutely. So, and anyway, I just happened to meet this clairvoyant and spiritual guidance business networking meeting. Now, I don't know if you've done any business networking at all, Sarah, but you just don't tend to meet clairvoyants. It's like you meet lots of accountants and financial advisors and utility warehouse salespeople. Nothing wrong with those people. I've got lots of friends who do that sort of thing. Nothing wrong with that at all. But clairvoyants are really fascinating to talk to, and I was just so intrigued by it. I was talking to her for most of the evening, and I was so intrigued that I decided to book up for a reading. I didn't feel the need for a reading at all because I was happy, I was content, no problem at all. So I went along for this reading, and she blew me away. She was incredible. She said so many things that were so true and so pinpoint accurate that she couldn't have found out from my website or from the social media. But then she also said things that didn't make sense at the time. They make perfect sense now, but they didn't at the time. So she said some things like a new way of being. She said there's an issue that you've always known about, but that you're not fully in integrity with. And she said, Spirit want you to go off into the countryside and go for a long walk and talk to yourself, talk to nature, talk to spirit, and they will show you what you need to see. So I thought, okay, well, I like walking. What the hell?
What did she use when she was like, when you had that first session with her? Was she using cards or?
No, there's no cards. It was no, there was no crystals or anything. No. We just sat there quietly. But yeah, she had her eyes closed. I had my eyes closed for some of it, and she just got in tune with them, and that. It's amazing. I don't know how she does it. I really don't know how she does it at all. Amazing. But we started off just by doing a bit of meditation or whatever, just to get relaxed and everything, and then she just started. But it was amazing. And thankfully she recorded the session, so I've got the recording of it, and it's amazing actually. When I listen back to it, I hear something new in it every time, and every now and again I do have a listen. It's incredible to listen back. It's such a pivotal moment in my life. It really was. Wow. But anyway, so she said this, go for this long walk. So I thought, well, okay, well, I like walking. Yeah, what the hell? Yeah. But I was really busy at the time. I was busy with my work, and of course it was the run up to our wedding. You see, so in the meantime,
were you skeptical about going for the walk and coming or whatever, or were you just sort of
No, I wasn't really skeptical. I had been to see clairvoyants previously, whenever I'd had some big decisions to make in my life before, because other friends had been to see clairvoyants and they'd recommended them, and I'd gone to see some really good ones. I went to see one that wasn't so good, but the other ones that I'd seen had been good. Yeah, they were good. Yeah.
Okay.
So I wasn't skeptical actually, but I thought, well, just give it a go. And I didn't know whether it would work or not. But now, in the meantime, we got married in August 2017, and it wasn't until very early November 2017 that I actually found time to go off for this long walk, and I took myself off to Rutland Water because I love it over there. And I remember it now. It was a beautiful day. It was a blue sky and the sun was shining. It was a very cold, crisp, clear day. And I went off with my map and my compass and my walking boots and my backpack, and I was on a mission. It was a really long route that I'd worked out. It was around the surrounding countryside, and I came back along the South Shore. And I was talking at the top of my voice. I was talking to myself. I was talking to nature, and I was talking to spirit, whoever they were. And I remember feeling disappointed at the time, because I was naively expecting some sort of light bulb moment or some sort of voice as if to say, this is what you should be seeing. Strangely, that didn't happen. Don't know why. I thought, oh, perhaps I've done it wrong. Perhaps I should have just sat serenely by the water's edge looking out to the reservoir. However, strangely, around the same sort of time, now whether it was a coincidence or not, I don't know, but it happened. But it was around the same sort of time, my gender dysphoria increased dramatically. It went through the roof. It was incredible. And so much so, I just didn't know what gender I was at all. I was in complete turmoil. It was awful. It was awful. It was just all-consuming. I couldn't think of anything else. And I was so troubled by that. I was even typing into Google, what gender is Martin Neeves? Now, I know that's crazy, because I know that the answer could only come from me. It couldn't come from anyone else, particularly Google. But I was desperate, and it's what desperate people do.
Yeah.
I think Google should have that as their new tagline. Desperate people use Google. I don't think they will. I don't think they'll take me up on that. But I was desperate for, that's what I was doing.
Like so high anxiety you must have had around it.
Oh, it was awful. It really was. But the thing is, I couldn't tell my wife about this inner turmoil, because I didn't want to, trouble her unnecessarily if it was something of nothing. But then also, if I did tell her, it would lead to her asking me questions which, at the time, I just didn't have the answers to. I didn't know. So I thought, what can I do? So I thought I'll get some counselling. So I found a counsellor who had experience of dealing with people with gender issues, and I had a few sessions with her. I should have probably had some more sessions with her, to be honest. I don't think I had enough sessions with her, but I wrongly concluded after a few sessions that I was gender fluid, and I realise now why I thought that, and that was my fear of admitting to myself that I was a transgender woman. Making me hang on to any bit of masculinity that I had, and that was an easy way of doing it. And so that's why I think that's why I concluded that. But anyway, I didn't sort of just have that conclusion. I at the same time of doing that, I was working my way through a self-help workbook called You and Your Gender Identity by Dara Hoffman Fox, who's a gender therapist from the States. And it's a brilliant book. It's like psychotherapy in a book, and there's a lot of work involved. It took me about 2 months to work my way through it.
Would you recommend
and by the time
would you still recommend
I would. It's a brilliant book. It's a really, really good book. Yeah,
okay.
Very, very good book. Yeah, no, I definitely recommend it. And by the time I got to about 3/4 of the way through the book, it became obvious that I wasn't gender fluid. I was in fact a transgender woman. And then by the time I got to the end of that book, the conclusion hadn't changed. So now I had two conclusions, but they were different. So I thought, what can I do now? So I thought, I know, I'll send a text back to the clairvoyant. Now I should point out at this stage, she's not just some sort of mystic Meg sitting in a caravan with a crystal ball predicting the lottery numbers. But to be honest, with the state of my finances at the moment, that would be quite handy. So if you know of anybody, and if anybody's watching this knows of anybody, if you can put their phone numbers in the chat, that'd be great. So I can,
all of them, yeah.
Yeah. So I tell that really dates me, doesn't it? Mystic Meg. That was right at the start of the lottery, wasn't it? No, I don't know. No, somebody told me about Mystic Meg actually. But no, she is actually a spiritual guide and spiritual healer, and she's specialising in clairvoyant healing, and she's a healer member of the National Federation of Spiritual Healers, which is recognised by the NHS. Okay. So she's got some credibility about her.
Sure.
Anyway, she suggested that I go along for what she calls a vision quest session. And what that is, it's a 4-hour interactive process. It's a really big process, long process. And she uses techniques such as deep meditation to get you into a really relaxed state until you get past all your fear and to access your inner truth. And so I did that. I went along on the 11th of January 2018. And during that session, she didn't give me any answers at all. She just asked me a series of questions. It was question after question after question after question. It was relentless. It really was. And now whether she got the questions from spirit, I haven't got a clue. I don't know. But she just asked me all these questions. And she allowed all the answers to come from me and from my inner truth. And it was such an emotional session. I cried buckets that day. I really did. And it was during that session that was when I admitted to myself that I am a transgender woman and that I need to change my body. And I haven't looked back since. And that was the point that I really felt female, and that I felt that Martin had stepped back and Katie had taken over. And it just felt so right that happened then. And during that process, actually, we also did lots of like gratitude processes and things like saying thank you to Martin for stepping back and allowing me to be Katie. And that was just such an important part of the process, because so many trans people that I know, in fact the vast majority, are very uncomfortable talking about their old name and talking about the past, and they like to block out their past. I mean, so much so that they call their old name their dead name. And I never have. I always call it my old name, and I'm proud of what I achieved as Martin and who I was as Martin. And I think, and Martin will always be a part of me. He'll always be in my heart. And that was why actually when you did your Instagram live recently, and we were doing that meditation, and that's what really touched me actually. And I really felt as if I got in touch with Martin then. So that thank you so much for doing that. That was lovely.
That was with
getting all emotional thinking about talking about it.
I think Rachel's on. Yeah, it's making me really emotional.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Rachel, for listening. Yeah. It was such a lovely thing. It really was. It really touched me, to be honest. Okay, so emotional. This is terrible. I don't think I do this. Right, pull yourself together.
No,
it's the hormone. It's the hormones. I can blame the hormones. So anyway, so at that session, I had discovered my true gender identity. So what was I going to do with this piece of information? I had a happy home life and I had a successful business. Could I put all of that in jeopardy just, for this new piece of information? But then again, could I go back to living how I was before with this new piece of information eating away at me? I didn't think that I could. So, and the thing is that I didn't want to be trans. No one does. It invariably involves a lot of loss, pain, and heartache, and a bumpy journey along the way, as well as dealing with prejudice and bigotry as well. So it's a really hard journey. No one chooses to be trans. The only choice I had was whether I did anything about it or not. And the research I did showed that most trans people who decide to transition after the initial loss, pain, and heartache and bumpy journey usually go on to lead happy and contented lives. Whereas, unfortunately, the majority of people who decide not to transition and to live their lives for other people sadly end up in a cycle of depression and often worse. And so the urge to live my truth was so overwhelmingly strong, because I was finally at peace with myself. I knew who I was, and it was an amazing feeling. It really was. So the urge to live my truth was just so overwhelmingly strong. It really was. So I just had to face up to it. I would say man up, but that's definitely the wrong thing to say, isn't it, Sarah? I'm going to get told off for that, aren't I? Terrible. Yeah. I didn't say that, Sarah. It's not as if we can edit that bit out, is it? It's live. It's out there. It's out there.
It's all right.
You know me. So the next challenge I had was to tell my wife about it, and that was the hardest thing. Yeah, well, I mean, the hardest thing was admitting to myself that I was trans, but the next hardest thing was to tell my wife, and I was so frightened of telling her. I mean, it took me a month to pluck up courage to tell her, and I actually wrote a letter to her just in case my words didn't come out right because I was so nervous. And in the end, my words did come out right. But I gave her the letter at the end anyway because she was in total shock. It was awful for her. I mean, it was such a bombshell. It was dreadful for her. So I felt terrible. And I should point out at this stage that gender and sexuality are completely separate entities and they're not linked. So in my case, I've always been attracted to women, and I still am, and it's been the one constant in my life. It's just that the labels changed for me. So previously I was labelled as a heterosexual man. Now I'm labelled as a gay woman or lesbian. So I do actually. I just noticed you use the word gay woman. I actually prefer that term actually rather than lesbian. Although I do say lesbian, but I'm okay with either. But
I'm kind of okay with either, but I tend to call myself
I think
gay.
I think gay woman sounds like a nicer term, really, isn't it? Anyway, I'm digressing there. But the labels changed for me. But obviously, from my wife, the label hadn't changed, and she was still attracted to men. So there was a mismatch. So we tried counselling, but sadly that didn't work. So that meant the end of my second marriage. It was a very short marriage, that one. And of course, then I had a dilemma of what to do about the name of my photography and video business because it was very strongly branded after my old male name, Martin. It was called Martin Neeves Photography and Film. But I decided, because it had been an established brand for 22 years, and I've got lots of great reviews, and was and actually still am actually ranked second in the country on free index of photographers. Based purely on customer reviews. I just felt that it was such a strong brand that I couldn't change it. So when I changed my name to Katie, I felt that I had to effectively distance myself from the brand, and instead of being Martin from Martin Neeves Photography and Film, I'd be Katie from Martin Neeves Photography and Film. But in order to do that, I had to come out very openly and very publicly as being trans and continue to do that. So I made a coming out video, and I sent it to all my clients, and I put it on all my social media. I tell you, I remember vividly my finger nervously hovering over the mouse, knowing that as soon as I make that click, my life would never be the same again. And anyway, I made. So
you sent an email. Did you send it on an email to all your clients as well as the?
Yeah, I did that. Yeah.
Okay.
I did that. Yeah, and but the first thing I did was Facebook, and I knew I made the click and I waited, but I had to go out on a job. My mind wasn't on the job at all. I was so frightened of what was going on here because my whole reputation, my livelihood, everything rested on the reaction to that one video. It's the most important video I've ever made. I needn't have worried because when I got back, I was inundated with hundreds of messages of support. It was amazing. I felt so loved. I really did. And it went from being something that I was absolutely dreading to being one of the most uplifting experiences of my life. It was amazing. Second name is the birth of my daughter. It was right up there. It was amazing. And I had loads of lovely messages, as well as from friends and from clients. I had lots of lovely messages from other trans people saying that they've been struggling with it and what I'd said had helped them. But also there was one particular message from a lady whose son had gender issues when he was going through puberty. And she said that she was so worried about it at the time. He was being treated for the gender clinic for kids. And she said she was so worried that at the time he'd either be bullied or he'd self-harm or even attempt suicide. And she was right to be worried. So many do. I mean, Stonewall's Trans Mental Health Survey of 2012 showed that 48% of trans people in the UK have attempted suicide at least once, and 84% have thought about it. I'm one of the lucky ones. I never have. I'm very lucky, but most of my trans friends have. And she said, if only there was someone like you out there at the time to let him know that it's okay to be trans, because it is okay to be trans. And that really got me thinking. I thought, I've got to do some good with this. So I decided to vlog my whole journey, bring people along on the journey with me, demystify the whole process, make it accessible, so that they can and show people that trans people are just ordinary people who want to be safe, loved and happy, just like everyone else.
Yeah.
And that's the message, And so I started doing that, and of course then my story was picked up initially in the local media, and I started doing interviews for local radio and local newspapers, and then it escalated, and I started doing national radio and television and national newspapers and magazines, and so all of a sudden I'd become this sort of trans ambassador, if you like, and then that led to me forming Cool to Be Trans, to do trans awareness training, public speaking, and media appearances. And I think a lot of bigotry and prejudice comes from a fear of the unknown. So if you can take the unknown away, then you're doing a really good thing. Because I think the more education there is, the more acceptance there'll be. And then the more acceptance there'll be, the easier it will be for trans people to A, admit to themselves they're trans, because that's the hardest thing, and B, do something about it and live their best lives. And that's what I'm doing. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, I've been in transition now, so I've been on hormones now for 2 years, 7 months now. And only because I've been paid for it privately, because I'm still on the waiting list for a first appointment at an NHS gender clinic. I mean, NHS gender services are absolutely broken, completely broken. But it's only because I was able to pay for it, And I've been living full time as female now for 2 years, 3 months, and it feels so right. It really does. That hasn't been a single day that I've got up in the morning and thought, oh, I'll pretend to be Martin today. Not a single day. It just felt so right. And even though I've got a different name and a different appearance, I'm still exactly the same person on the inside. I've got the same skills, the same experience, the same sense of integrity, same sense of humour, however warped. I'm still exactly the same person, but far, far happier. I also have cravings for chocolate now too, but it's a girl thing. But I've lost count of the number of people who've told me that I look so much happier now, and I'm not surprised, because it's the real me. I'm loving, being able to live my truth. I mean, a lot of people talk about gender dysphoria, but not so many people talk about gender euphoria, and it really does feel euphoric. And even though all the loss, pain, and heartache that I have gone through, which there's a lot that I haven't gone into. There's an awful lot. I've lost family through it. I've lost my sister through it. I had big problems with my mum over it, and and obviously I lost my wife over it. So there's been an awful lot of loss. It cost me a lot of money. I've had a year in court with it, and I've had a lot going on. But even though all of that, I feel so much happier in myself. I feel fantastic. I really do. So you shouldn't be sorry for trans people. You should be happy for us, because we're able to live our truths, and it feels blooming amazing. It really does.
Celebrate.
Absolutely, And I do put a lot of my happiness as well, and the way that I've been able to handle this, down to the help that I've had with the clairvoyant and spiritual healer, because she. It wasn't just that one session that I had with her. I've had several other sessions since, where at various different crisis points, where I've had some very low points, along the way. She's really helped me through them, and the processes that she's done have been brilliant. And so she's the one that I really credit with me being so grounded, with being grateful to Martin for stepping back and allowing me to be Katie. And I really do think fondly of Martin, and it's funny how I sort of talk about him in the third person, in fact, but I know that was me, but it was just it's just how I feel, and I think it is down to the work that I've done with her. It's been very, very important work, and I think a lot of people ignore the spiritual side of their well-being.
Feels really.
And I must say, I always had, to be honest, up until then, but I'm so glad that I just had that chance meeting with her at that business network thing. It was obviously meant to be, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
And the thing is, I'm not religious in the slightest, but I'm spiritual but not religious. It's a very clear distinction there. Very clear. But there's definitely something in it, because God, the help she's given me has really, really, kept me sane, to be honest.
It feels really healing how you talk about it as well. In terms of that relationship you have with Martin as well, and
I'm very comfortable with that, and I'm it's funny because a lot of people say to me, well, why don't you change the name of your business, the photography business, because I'm still running that as well as doing Cool to Be Trans. I'm doing both.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I could now because of all the trans ambassador work, and you know me, I'm never off social media, am I? I'm a real social media tart. Yeah, I'm all over it.
I was going to say butterfly. It's a tart.
I don't mind being a tart. One of my friends calls me a trans tart. So Kelly, if you're watching, there you go. That's your phrase. She calls me a trans tart. Yeah. So yeah. So
okay.
So I forgot what I was saying now.
Then you were saying about your photography business, and maybe your name is quite well known now.
Yeah, so I could. I'm actually better known now as Katie than I was as Martin, ironically. So I could actually change it to Katie Neeves Photography and Film, and it would work. But I just think actually I don't want to really, because it's quite a nice tribute to Martin. It was like Martin's business, and I'm like looking after it for him, I just think it's quite a nice way of keeping the name going without it being my name. So it's quite a nice tribute to Martin in a way. So I'm okay with it. I'm going to keep it as it is. Yeah.
No.
So, but a lot of people just think I'm completely mad for thinking like that, because I think so many trans people are not comfortable with their old name and talking about their old name, and so many they won't tell you their old name. They just want to block it out. They want to block it out.
I think it's important for us to know that as well.
Absolutely, and absolutely 100% respect it. And I think a lot of it is how happy they were in their previous lives. And the thing is that I was happy in my previous life as Martin, even though there was all this going on. The majority of the time, I was happy as a man who needed to cross-dress, and it was only when my gender dysphoria increased dramatically that's when I wasn't happy, and I was in complete turmoil, and it was horrendous. And I think for the people who had the gender dysphoria at a lot stronger at a lot earlier age, they're the ones that need to transition earlier. And then often if they don't transition, then they live a lot of their life unhappy. And so I can understand why they would want to block that out. So I totally respect them for doing that. Totally. I really do. But it's what's right for the individual, and certainly the way that I've approached it has certainly been right for me.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing that.
Oh, you're welcome.
I guess the thing that I wanted to ask you before we wrap up is around what would be the sort of things that you would share with people in terms of I guess the things that have supported you on your journey. What would be like one or two things that you think that other people could perhaps take away and think about for themselves in terms of to support
Well, I think the main message to other trans people or people that are questioning their gender is that it really is okay to be trans. That is the main thing, because so many trans people think that their life has ended as soon as they can't admit to themselves they're trans because it's just far too difficult to contemplate. And to be honest, if I hadn't met the clairvoyant, I would have felt exactly the same way, because at that point that I did admit to myself that I was trans, I just thought it was just like this canyon to get across, and I was on one side and I couldn't get to the other side. I couldn't do it. I really didn't think that I could get across it. And it was just way too hard, and because I really didn't want to be trans. No one chooses to be trans, and so you fight against it as much as you can. You fight against it. But so that is the main message that I would say, is that the world will let you in. It's a lot easier now than it's ever been. I mean, you know, you look back to, you know, when, you know, you look back to like when I was a kid in the 70s, and you think of all, you know, everything that was going on then, all the queer bashing that was going on then, and you know, if anyone came out as gay, that was a scandal, and no one else spoke about trans issues then. And I think gay people have come on an awful long way since then. I think bisexual people are some way behind them, and trans people, we're about 30 years behind all of them. But we're coming on. There's more and more of us coming out. There's more talked about in the media, and I think the internet has been brilliant, because for you know, sharing information like this is fantastic. We wouldn't have been able to have done this a few years ago.
No, thank you so much for being here, sharing all of that with us. I've noticed as you've been talking, we're getting lots of hearts.
Oh, I've just seen a load go out there. Oh, yeah, thank you. Whoever sent that.
Lots of love coming through, which is wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much to everyone who's joined us, and anyone that's watching on the replay too. I'll put this in my IGTV, and I'll also probably put some links to some of certainly that resource that you talked about, the book one.
Yeah.
And anything else that maybe, well, certainly where to find you, Katie. In the
it's hard. It's hard not to find me on social media, really, isn't it? Let's face it.